down, but for what reasons we shall see. So why Western Balkans? We could observe here in this figure that we have seen different performance levels, which might imply various transition policies. On the other hand, all these countries come from the same institutional environment, which implies that they have many similar initial conditions, although they differ in one initial condition, which is a GDP level. So for all these reasons, these similarities and dissimilarities, I see Western Balkans as an interesting laboratory to check what the theories have said and how do they can help, how they could help us in assessing the transition growth and transition progress. I shall start with this case of Serbia in the 90s. Well, despite declaring transition, the government pursued actually a policy of centralization and regulation. Even the inherited market independence of firms was substantially restricted. And what is the worst thing? Hyperinflation took place that started at 100% monthly rate and ended in '94 at 330 million% monthly rate. So one of the biggest in the history of mankind, and the longest one for sure. So we can here think about Serbia as a typical case of wrong policies and politics, I will add. So why that? Because GDP drop is actually incited by the politics, because breakup of the country, which is a political case, put the GDP down 25%, then EU and UN bans on foreign trade for Serbia, which is again the result of bad politics, moved it 15%, and hyperinflation 50% down. And no policy changes there were observed whatsoever. And what is the worst thing? Serbia is again and again entering new and new conflicts with the neighboring countries. Now, during the 90s, me and my colleagues, we wanted my faculty to show how much Serbia was lagging behind the others due to wrong policy and politics as well, and how much did it cost. And I shall present here some very simple models which we have used to depict this. This is rather an illustration than analysis. Our model one was based on the idea that performance depends on transition progress, that is on policy. So our two regressions, one for 96, the other one for 98, show GDP per capita index change as a dependent on transition progress, where transition progress was measured by a sum of EBRD assessments for transition progress. What is maybe interesting that in both years we got almost the same result. But we are now facing another more interesting question. What decides on achievable level of transition in a country? What is really achievable? We can say Serbia performed, had bad policy. But what would be a right policy? What is achievable under the circumstances of, for instance, Serbia? So we built another very simple model. Transition progress depends on initial conditions. That was the idea. What initial conditions? First, in equation 3, on GDP, initial GDP level. And in equation 4, on another, we put another dummy variable for market reforms, whether a country had some market reforms or not, and calculated for the full group of transition economies. And then we were able to see the following thing. Those columns represent transition progress as measured by EBRD for all the countries, and Serbia was somewhere there in 1999. Very low, very much lagging behind. This was the average line. This yellow line was the average line. But using our models, we have discovered that Serbia could be at the level of this orange line. So somewhere in the front. And that was the way how we could measure mistakes in policies. But that is not the whole story. In this picture, you can also see the same idea. The yellow line depicts the real GDP per capita dynamics over the 90s. The blue line is the estimated one according to our models with a real transition progress. And the red one is that achievable level when we use the estimated transition progress to estimate the growth of the GDP. So you see that actually between red and blue line, that is the cost of the wrong policy. And just for your information, in money terms, for instance, in 2000, that loss was around $16 billion, whereas total GDP was only $11 billion. So you can see what is a tremendous loss in that part of the world due to the wrong policies. We made a step forward. We tried to examine the other neighboring countries, the other Balkan countries and some countries in the close vicinity. So the blue lines, the first columns, they are for real GDP level. The purple lines in the middle, they are as calculated and estimated, taking into account that transition progress is endogenous. So we have calculated what was the achievable progress, in this case, based on equation 3, in the other, the orange one, based on equation 4, when we put market, whether there were market reforms or not. And we got the result, the GDP, using the first two equations. And what we can remark that Slovenia only there